like to call the April 29th work session to order. Council, it used to be when I went to church on Holy Saturday evening for our resurrection service, there would be police officers there not to protect us, but to make sure that we threw fireworks when we proclaimed the Christos Anesti in the proper direction. I went to services tonight or Saturday night, and there were two of our police officers there. And then I realized when I woke up the next day that they were there not necessarily to protect us from throwing firecrackers, because we don't do that anymore, but rather to protect a house of worship and its parishioners. You know, since we last met, there was a very tragic accident in Sri Lanka, or no, in Ceylon. Yeah.
Yes, right.
And then the other day for Passover services. And I want our residents to realize and know that each one of us here in Clearwater should respect and tolerate not only religious differences, but also cultural differences. And I'm sure that each one of us agree that we hope that our country will soon reestablish those basic principles upon which it was founded for religious diversification, cultural identities, and respect individuals who are different than each one of us. And with that, I would ask that we please rise for a moment of silence in memory of those who've lost their lives. May the Lord our God grant them everlasting life in his kingdom and a long life to each of us. Thank you very much. We don't have any presentations today, Council, so our next item is agenda item 3.1, Mr. Horn.
Thank you, Mayor. Approve supplemental 5 work order for the Kapok Terrace Sanitary Sewer Stormwater System Improvements Project to engineer of record King Engineering Associates Incorporated of Tampa, Florida, in the amount of $53,300 for engineering services during construction, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Brown.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Brown, the engineering manager for utilities. This project provides Kapok Terrace residents the ability to abandon their septic system and connect to the city's sewer system. Residents have requested additional drainage and curbing improvements that will not impact the construction budget, but will extend the schedule until about May of 2019. Extending the schedule requires additional engineering inspection services, which is the item before you today.
Any questions of staff on agenda item 3.1? Consent? Mr.
I
Condon.
was just going to ask, you said May 2019, so by the end of next month.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to end around March of 2019, and these additional requests have extended it to May.
Consent?
Thank you.
Agenda item 3.2.
Approve First Amendment to Management Agreement between Mr. and Mrs. Robert E. Smith and the City of Clearwater for management of the city-owned Hillsborough Keystone property, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Burzak.
Morning, Robert Burzak, Real Estate Services Coordinator. Mr. and Mrs. Smith have overseen and managed the Hillsborough Keystone property since 1982. The current management agreement runs through March 2021. The amendment will reduce the termination noticing of the agreement from 90 days to 30 days. City staff supports this amendment. The remainder of the management agreement will remain unchanged. Any questions?
Yes, sir. How are you feeling?
Getting better every day.
Okay. Okay.
I have an additional question.
Mr. Pogler.
Why are we reducing it from 90 to 30? Who does that benefit?
Well, it benefits the city for the current contract that we have, which right now the inspection period runs through May of this year, and actually the reduction in the amendment to the management agreement will help with the closing, basically, because we have a 15 business days for the closing, and that'll extend it to 60 days.
So far, it's strictly administrative.
It's an administrative thing, yes.
Just for now. For this particular
For
contract?
this particular contract for the Keystone property.
Okay.
I think this is the property that we've entered into agreement to sell.
Okay.
Before you got
Okay,
back on
okay.
council, okay?
Okay,
So
now I
this is
got it.
just to
Correct.
allow us to
Correct.
terminate.
Yeah, you may not recall, because it's been a while now, but we entered into a contract to sell this property over a year ago, I think, or about a year ago.
The actual contract was finalized in December of,
But you approved it some
Right.
time ago, or conceptually.
Okay.
And so this just allows us to only have a 30-day termination period when we're ready to close. They're still in the purchasers are still in their due diligence period. So that was the purpose of all this,
correct.
administrative only.
Consent?
Yep.
Thanks. Get well.
Thank you.
Agenda item 4.1.
Reappoint Rick G. Stucker to a 4-year term as trustee of the Clearwater Firefighters Supplemental Trust Fund in accordance with Section 175.061 of the Florida State Statutes. Chief Ellers.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Scott Ellis, Fire Chief, City of Clearwater Fire Rescue. This item is normally brought up to you by retired Lieutenant Tommy Jensen, but because we're in that quandary on can it be presented as a non-city employee, I'm presenting on this one. But basically, this item before you is approval as a request to reappoint Rick Stucker for a 4-year term as trustee of the Clearwater Firefighter Supplemental Trust Fund. As a reminder, the Clearwater Firefighter Supplemental Trust Fund is the recipient of monies obtained by the state of Florida from insurance companies. These monies are required to be administered by a board of trustees whose composition must consist of 2 legal residents of the city appointed by the city council, 2 firefighters elected by the firefighters, and a 5th member chosen by a majority of the other 4 members and submitted to the council for appointment. Mr. Stucker currently serves as the board's chairman and has been a trustee on the board for over 30 years. He is a city resident and a local business owner and has indicated his willingness to serve another term. With that, I have
Any
happy to answer
questions for the chief on 4.1? We didn't have the lieutenant here when he retired. He just went off. Bring him up.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
How is everybody?
We're fine, Lieutenant. Thank you. We didn't have an opportunity to tell you goodbye, here at council, but we appreciate your service and your
I am going
colleagues.
to be over at the Sheraton tomorrow for the board appreciation dinner.
Okay.
The pack for forever.
For the pack,
too, so
right.
A lot of stuff ended, but
Very
thank
good.
you all very much.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
seeing everybody.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, sir.
This will be on consent for Thursday night. Agenda item 4.2.
Approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Clearwater and St. Petersburg College, Clearwater East Community Library to provide the City of Clearwater access to the library's parking lot for the purpose of a point of distribution for 2019 emergencies events as outlined in the agreement, and authorize the city manager or designee to enter into an approved standard memorandum of understandings for future use of private properties by the city's emergency management. Chief Graham.
Good morning, Javon Graham, Emergency Manager. City of Clearwater currently utilizes 2 point of distribution locations. One is at the Armory right off of the MLK, and the other one was Joe DiMaggio Field at the parking area. However, as we all know from 2017 Irma, that field was also where we stored all our citywide vegetative debris. With that, we needed to find a different location for one of the 2. That's a great location for the debris, but became not a good location for the point of distribution for the community to give out supplies and equipment. With that, we needed to find a location that provided similar arteries with Drew Street, Old Coachman, and gave the community the same ability to get supplies if needed. So we've looked at the property across the street, which is the parking lot for the library. It's high ground, had no damage to the library, and that became a good location with this MOU. Along with this MOU, the college has agreed to allow us to utilize their first floor in the event of large-scale emergencies for volunteer components, to accept volunteers and to distribute them from this location. Again, in 2017, when we did have Irma, which is one of the bigger events we've had, not only did the college withstand the storm, they were a Cat 4 building, they had no damage, never lost utilities, and again, they were high and dry and had good access for everybody to come through there. So with this MOU, it allows the city manager to sign annually, every calendar year, and it'll be in effect during every year for the event of the possibility of a storm. Any questions?
Questions on 4.2? Vegetative debris?
You like that?
How much vegetative debris did we collect during the storm?
Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a lot.
It was an awful lot. Yeah, that whole lot was full.
I think Mr. Gloucester said it was like the equivalent of four football fields.
Six
Six
months,
football
yeah.
fields. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of debris that was there.
Great. Thank you. Consent?
Yes.
5.1.
Authorize a blanket contract with Centus Uniform Services of Tampa, Florida, in the annual amount of $175,000, $25,000 building and maintenance, $150,000 public utilities for the rental of uniforms, floor mats, and purchase of clothing from May 1, 2019 through April 30th, 2023, in accordance with the Code of Ordinance Section 2.5641D, other governmental bids, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter.
Good morning, David Porter, Public Utilities Director. I'm here this morning to ask you to authorize us to contract with Cintas, the firm that's been providing us uniform services for a number of years for our employees. The uniforms that we purchase or rent for our staff are largely from a safety standpoint. They protect our employees from cuts and scrapes and things, but also from biological hazards that they deal with on a daily basis. In addition, we are also asking on behalf of Building and Maintenance Department for $25,000 for them to do the same with their electricians who use specialized uniforms in their own electrical equipment. In addition to what we've asked for here later down in the body of the document, we are also asking you to approve an increase of $18,000 in the existing contract so that we can run the contract additionally another month and a half till we get to through April and the early part of May to get this contract in place. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on 5.1? Mr. Condon?
Sir.
Thank you, sir. It looks like we're piggybacking from
We are, sir.
another.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You talked about the uniforms. You didn't say what the floor mats.
Oh, there are some floor mats that Building and Maintenance rents from Cintas also because they clean them. So they have some areas where the floor mats evidently get very dirty and need to be cleaned on a regular basis and didn't have a mechanism for getting that done previously. I don't know if Earl is here. I don't really know all the details about the floor mats that they're renting, but it's evidently must be a small amount.
One question. Mr. Pogler?
Thank you, Mayor. The additional 18,000,
Yes, sir.
was that not covered in the first contract, or how come there's an
It
additional
was a
18?
time difference. The first contract, when they were negotiating this contract, it took longer than expected.
Okay.
So from the time period that the old contract expired till we can get this new one started,
Okay.
there's an additional $18,000.
Okay. Or and that 18,000 covers 1 month?
It's a month and a half, I
Month and a
believe.
half? Okay. Thank you.
Very well.
Consent?
Yes.
Hey,
6.1.
thank you.
Approve contract purchase order to Dix Height and Partners, Inc. of Longwood, Florida, in the amount of $483,340 for Phase 2 architectural and engineering services for the design of Crest Lake Park, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Dunbar.
Good morning, Kevin Dunbar, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I have Assistant Director Mike Lockwood with me here today. The City Manager says for Crest Lake Park on March the 1st of 2018, completed the Phase 1 architectural, or we started, or Council approved to do Phase 1 architectural and engineering work, which included doing the final schematic design for Crest Lake Park. Approval of this item today, we'll do our construction documents and all the supporting construction elements for this project. We're looking to get started in assuming that everything moves forward in the schedule that we have by the end of January with groundbreaking. Included in the new Crest Lake Park would be new trails, a couple of picnic pavilions, a restroom building, splash pad, new playground, some boardwalks, and some sand beach launches would be part of that. Also, with these expanded facilities and expanded use, will be some additional staffing that will be needed, as well as additional operating costs. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff on 6.1? Mr. Albritton?
Yeah, I saw the conceptual plan when we met on this, but when will we be able to see the detailed drawings of the restrooms and things like that? Because I'm kind of curious.
That's what this item is. It
Yes.
would be to start doing that. So we'll have 30, 60, and 90% reviews of those be throughout the course of this year.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Kondo.
Thank you. Are we using BP money for this?
That is the funding source for this, correct?
Comes into Parks and Rec to pay for it, and then,
Yeah, the BP funds, if I recall correctly, were 6.4 million, and that's what this project budget is.
Mr.
Um,
Hamilton.
I saw the conceptual drawings, and I'm, really excited. I know the neighborhood is as well, and Crest Lake is much more than a neighborhood park. But I noticed one of the things on the conceptual possible, one or two sand volleyball courts is is that something the neighborhood is looking for, or the residents are looking for there? Because, we got a lot of sand out west of here that have volleyball courts on it, and it's, is that something that we feel is necessary, or?
I think if you go back to the initial design, that was something that the community, because we had over 100 residents attend community meetings, and that's one of the things that elevated to the top is items that they'd like to see in the park.
That's what I wanted you to say. Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Any other questions, Council? Yeah, let's remember that you said 100 meetings. I don't think you meant we had.
100 plus people, yes.
Yeah, we had lots of meetings within the throughout the community, because we're looking at Crest Lake Park as not just being a neighborhood park, but really a regional attractor because of the traffic that goes by there. The one thing that I noticed, Council, that was missing, and I asked Mr. Dunbar, and that was to have a wow feature there, and I believe, and help me out, years ago there used to be a fountain in Crest Lake Park, in the center of the park, yeah.
And we're going to take a look at that. One of the reasons that it's currently not on the plans is because some of the impacts it has to some of nature. And so that's one of the things that we'll be looking at through the construction process. It's something we'd like to see in there, but also, the ducks, some of the other wildlife that are there, and we want to make sure that it doesn't negatively impact.
Okay. And I think you had indicated to us that the berms were going to
Yes.
leave so that you can get a much more visual.
Yeah, you'll get a clean view from Gulf to
Right.
Bay.
And let's reassure, what are we going to be doing with the dog park?
What we're currently doing with it. The dog park is not part of any of the construction. I know I've seen a couple of comments where people thought that we were relocating the dog park to someplace else. Dog park is staying exactly where it is, with the dog runs exactly where they are.
Okay. Consent, Council?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
7.1.
Approve a revised combined agreement with CenturyLink, Inc. of Monroe, Louisiana for telecommunications and internet services in the amount of $330,000 for fiscal year 2019 through fiscal year 2021, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Shute.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Sabrina Chute, Information Technology Department. This is to combine our internet and our telecommunication services into a single purchase order, which will take us through 2021.
Any questions on 7.1? Consent? 7.2.
Approve a contract and award RFP 35-18 to Permit Rocket Software LLC of Miami, Florida in the amount of $389,022 for software maintenance, subscription services, and professional services, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Horn, just to let you know, it's not on the sheet here, but this is Mr. Williams' first time presenting to council.
Oh, okay. Well, you get a pass. No, you don't get a pass, but be nice to him.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is an approval of an RFP to something we issued in 2018 as an upgrade of the EDR system, electronic document review system, inside our land management system, which is Acela.
Any questions on 7.2? Consent?
How long is this? Is this a one-year contract or is this?
Oh, it's a
multi-year?
5-year contract.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Albert?
Is this going to help be able to, this is through the building department, Acela? Will we be able to can use this to submit large electronic documents now?
It improves the process. Currently, we currently allow electronic document submission and review from contractors and citizens, but this is an improvement on that system. And it does include large documents, thousands of pages.
Okay, all right, good.
The problem when you have a computer, and normally I don't bring this with me, but how do we get to 389,022? Because each year is 55,746, so that comes out to 28,278,000.
There is implementation
So
fee in the
there's some,
first year.
okay.
Yeah, there is implementation fee in the first year, which brings it to just under 120,000, I believe, which includes the first.
Okay,
year's
that's 115,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I think we have a contingency of around 50,000.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we need to add, don't make the same, if you look at the agenda item, don't just multiply the 55 by 5, because you don't get the 3, okay.
Nothing is simple math anymore.
Well, we're trying to throw softball questions, Actually, I missed that one. Any other questions before we put this on consent? 7.3.
Approve a modified 5-year maintenance schedule and contract to Tyler Technologies, Inc. of Yarmouth, Maine, for maintenance and support fees for Munis Financials, Human Capital Management Software, and Tyler Systems Management in the amount of $1,233,793.63. Authorize annual maintenance payment releases in accordance with the license and services agreement approved by council on May 16, 2017, for a total not to exceed amount of $1,233,793.63 over a 5-year period, 2019 through 2023, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kirkpatrick, this is her first time presenting.
Another one.
Second?
Second time, she's gonna be hard on us.
Oh, okay, you screwed up. All right, go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Billy Kirkpatrick, Senior Systems Analyst, IT. So you previously approved this contract and the budgeted dollars, but here we're adding on an additional level of support and requesting your permission to pay the maintenance.
Any questions on 7.3? Why do we need this additional support?
It's an additional level of support. It's $30,000 a year. It's something that we can turn off anytime, but we feel like it's a good thing to have, especially as we go through implementation.
It gives us priority status when we call in, and we should be getting a dedicated person on our end, which the accumulation of those experiences is valuable if you work with one person on a regular basis. So
For sure.
we thought it was worth the time.
Consent?
Yes.
Thank you.
8.1, Ms. Call?
Reappoint Kevin Chanel and Peter Scalia to the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board with terms to expire May 31st, 2023. Council members, both individuals are able to be reappointed and haven't expressed an interest in being reappointed, and staff has no concerns with their reappointments.
Any questions on 8.1? Consent?
Yes.
Yeah.
9.1 through 15 are second readings. Any questions on the second readings, council? Okay, so we'll move on to 10.1.
Mayor and Council, we are going to give you an Imagine Clearwater update. It will consist of three issues. One, it's a continuation of a conversation you all had a couple of weeks ago on the pavilion and the elevated walkway, and then I've added a conversation around the issue of parking. I added that primarily because it seems like over the number of months that we've been working on this project, I keep hearing comments about not having adequate parking for the park, primarily with a focus toward the boat slip users. And so my sense is that we should, if we're going to do anything different than what's in the plan regarding parking for the park, it's important for us to know that now versus later when the design elements, start to be prepared. Mr. Maxwell.
Thank you. Michael Maxwell, Assistant City Manager. So what we've brought back today are some visuals of the park that sort of show this corner. Let's see if I don't jump around too much. This area right here, the elevated walkway and the pavilion, right? So at the meeting in March, we discussed the idea of potentially pulling back lost my mouse, pulling back the pavilion, shrinking the size of the pavilion, and then also removing the elevated walkway. We reported back at the last meeting that removing the elevated walkway would, we believe, have some significant impacts to the bluff walk and its ability to sustain itself as a continuous walkway. The pavilion, the loss of that extra space would significantly reduce the covered area for the pavilion, hampering some of our ability to have some of the events that we would like to have and its functionality. And then we also at that meeting discussed the parking that you see there right in this area. The one that comes through the park. So I'm going to start off just talking a little bit about the pavilion and the elevated walkway, though, and show you some different elevations that I think that the council had asked to see some different perspectives. There's one that I have not received yet, which is from Water's Edge looking out, but we do have some other ones that I think would be very helpful. Just as a reminder, this is sort of the current version of the pavilion. Reduction of the size. When you look at this black line here, this is right around where that reduction would occur. So this area would not go away from a physical perspective, just the covering portion. So it would sort of slice this portion off right here. It would also pull back a little bit and reduce some of the size underneath, but we were really more focused on the pavilion portion itself. This is a rendering of looking sort of from the south, I guess, west up towards the pavilion itself, and you can see that this is the current version now, not the adjusted one. It comes out, it swings over, maintains this elevation that it begins over here. All right, it maintains the old bluff is over here. Comes up, merges with this facility, and then you swing on over here. So this is one perspective of it. I've also added in here a perspective that includes the Harborview Center, so you can see kind of where the footprint of that building would be. While we are not keeping this wall is being demolished. This was originally, and on the previous slide, it actually identifies it as the existing Harborview wall along Cleveland. So that wall is actually going away, and we'll reconstruct a different wall. But the pavilion itself, the reason for showing this is just to show where the edge of the pavilion is. And so it's on the other side of Cleveland, basically in line with the current Harborview building with that wall. Now, just to show a little different perspective, and I think this is one that I've had some questions around here. This is right around where that elevated bridge is. So the bridge would come and go across right over in this area here. And you can see, I tried my best to get everything in the picture, everything that I could. But this is the top of the road over here. That's an elevation 30, all right? And we also achieved an elevation 30 for the bridge right over here. So it's pretty consistent with Cleveland. So we're matched up with where Cleveland and Osceola intersect. We're at that same elevation when we get out to the elevated walkway and the platform itself. The effect on Water's Edge, now granted this is in the middle of the road. It will be back further, but the pavilion base, the part that people will be walking on, bless you, will come right along this line here. So this unit is the only one that will be below the walkway for the pavilion. The rest of them will all be elevated above those that structure. It won't be elevated above the covering, but it would be elevated above the walkway itself. This is just to show, and it doesn't, I guess the wording didn't come out very well, but this just shows the elevation we pulled from a stormwater map. This is the elevation up at Cleveland and Osceola, and then you can see down here we have about an elevation 11.9. That's not right on the edge of where we're getting to. It's actually a little further down, actually, right around there, I believe. But if we went back to the plan version that I showed you earlier, it's consistent with that plan. So we have a pretty big elevation drop down to that area, but we flatten it out with the walkway. And now I just have some other perspectives to show you all. This is the version with the pulled back. So you can see this pavilion here is not as far forward as the other one was. The other one came out to here. So this is just showing that with the harbor view. And then without the harbor view, probably a little easier to see in that version because the harbor view is not there. Then this is from Cleveland looking towards the water. So at this point, you're at the elevation 30, and you can see you're kind of going straight out to that elevated walkway. Again, this is just with the harbor view sort of overlaid. So you can see where the footprint is. And then this is down from the park, just to show an additional. So the floor, this is that first floor. The one unit would be down in this green area. That's the unit that is the only unit that is below in water's edge, the pavilion. And then again with the harbor view, that's what it looks like with the harbor view in it now. And those were the slides I wanted to show you as far as the different perspectives. And maybe I'll pause there and ask you if you have any questions about those elevations or those pictures.
Mr. Albert.
Well, I've got concerns about the walkway. I went over to Harborview this morning and walked it and got a better perspective. Go back to the original, wait, right there, that's good. Yeah. Now see that little triangle that represents, right in there. What happens is the hill that's there now actually from the old City Hall comes across to the southwest corner of Water's Edge. And then from that point, it goes down toward the street. That's the grade now, which it does kind of show that below that triangle that you just pointed at. My concern is I tried to get an idea looking from the top of the hill and then, shooting across kind of like where you just showed us. The walkway would be at the top of the railing on that, those units there, I think, are not, it would be complete, the window there of that unit would be covered by the walkway hill that you'd have to build up. And the walkway would be even with the top of the level of the balcony. I just don't know how you're going to do that right up to the building, because that conceptual drawing that you showed isn't a really good drawing of really the way Water's Edge looks. It shows it flat all the way across, and it doesn't. It actually goes down. So would that be a elevated walkway all the way to the southwest corner of Water's Edge, where it goes into the hill?
It won't be an elevated walkway all the way to the south corner. It will come around the corner, and you can see these pilings here. I can certainly get them to show something a little different here, but these pilings would help. This is kind of where the elevated walkway would cease to exist, so right around this area. then it's just part of the bluff. Once it hits that edge of that triangle right there. So we won't necessarily have a bunch of fill. There will be some fill in there to make sure that
So
we
you're
have.
completely covering the window on the lower level, whatever that is, a retail or whatever that is down there. See where the steps go up? There's a big window like on the side of the building that's right there. Yeah, the same kind of window, and that's going to be almost completely covered by a walk, you know. And it looks like fairly right up to the building itself, so.
I haven't asked them for any sort of rendering on that edge, you know, or something that shows exactly what it's going to do. I can certainly.
I'd like to get a little clarification on that, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, but council, I think we have to keep in mind here, we've got a project that's going to benefit the entire city that we're looking at. And there's no, you know, the fact that Water's Edge, in fact, initially built on city land, and we had to give them some of that property that have impacted these units, if I remember correctly. You know, we're again trying to delay a project for one person. And there's nothing that said, I mean, if we were going to do this for every project, whether it's a city project or another developers, we wouldn't be building anything because it's affecting somebody's view.
I'm not saying the view, I'm talking about a hill, dirt being pushed up against a glass window at that building there. It's not like 10 feet away, it's right up against that building, and the glass where I was looking looks like you're pushing dirt up against a glass window. That it's not just the view, I'm just concerned about the setback on that and how that would affect. All I want to know is, I'd like to see how that is going to be taken care of. I understand the conceptual part of it, but just give me a detail on how that's going to connect, because it looked like it's connecting right against the building.
Well, again, it's delaying our work because we're concerned about, you know, moving forward. For one unit that was built on land that was originally city property, and we had to give them that property to make it legal. Mr. Cundiff.
Am I understanding it right that that corner, ground floor, are offices and not residences?
I'm not sure. I've not asked the owners, so I'm not sure if that's an office or for a residence.
I happened to walk through those offices or around those offices in the hallway, and the corner is, except for the entrance, there are offices, not residences.
Mr. Hamilton.
And I want to go to a different area of the presentation, but I think, I don't know that there's that much fill being put in there as much as it'll be pilings that will support the elevated walkway until it reaches the existing grade, is my understanding. So it may not, I don't think we're going to be putting dirt up to windows to block windows off. It'll be pilings.
That's what I'm asking.
They may be looking at pilings, but they're not going to look at dirt.
So we'll confirm whether or not they're going to be putting dirt in there or not. I don't believe they're going to be covering the window, but I will check with them.
But my question, Mike, mine's more about the pavilion itself. You said by bringing the covered area back, reducing the covered area, we wouldn't be able to hold some of the type events we were thinking of. What events are we speaking of? Because, well, I'll let you answer that question, then I'll ask the follow-up.
No, so some things like the market, okay, during the summertime. Now, there is not in our area a market, Saturday market, Sunday market, whatever the day of the week it is, that would be able to be in a covered space. St. Petersburg, for instance, is out next to the Rowdy Stadium in the exterior. So when they have to shut down during the summertime when it starts to rain a lot, when it starts to be overly hot. This facility was I think part of the reason that it was designed was to be able to house some of those things during the summer. So you could have, if I move back a slide, you could have the normal market in a different portion, maybe right down here. It's still the Civic Gateway. Or you could have it up in this area if the weather, desired it there. Other events you could have there, I mean, there are numerous weddings, possibly bands, those sorts of things that we would currently shut down and sort of have up here. But we're really trying to, it's events that would draw in people from Osceola and Cleveland into the park, because that's really the goal of the Civic Gateway, is to pull people in. So whatever frankly, Parks and Rec can come up with that will attract.
Because I look at it and I say, I have no problem with the floor area being the size that we're looking at to create that. But if we pull the covered area back, you're still allowing about 4,000 square feet of covered area. And correct me if I'm wrong, but 4,000 square feet, that's as big as almost any, for lack of a better comparative, church sanctuary in the area, in the city. And if you're going to do a wedding, you can put a lot, you can put a lot of people under there if that's the type of event you're doing. And if we're going to do, part of the market there, space under that covered area could be, as far as what the people pay to have their, space could be a premium space. And then out uncovered, they have to bring their own tent to set up or whatever, but it could still be a functional area. And I'm not sure we need 8,000 square feet of covered area. I think that's a lot. And
Clarify, this is about 2,700 feet in this area. That's the calculation that the engineers provided me.
See, I was hearing that I was hearing the whole area was 8,000, and by taking it back, it'd cut it down to about 4.
It will cut it down to about 2,700 because of the width of this versus this area here. So it's about 2,700 is the information that they've provided. Now, we're not necessarily asking you to make any decisions on this today. In fact, Mr. Delk's going to be getting into the project pretty heavily in the next few weeks. So, we want to give him an opportunity to work through some of these issues as well, and talk to the engineers and review the plan.
Mr. Public.
Thank you, Mayor. I, for one, am absolutely against delaying this project, but for me, what is really helpful is that finally seeing some 3D virtual renderings of where that walkway is going to be. Up until now, I didn't think it was going to be at the very top of the hill, of the bluff. So seeing this does help me. And I don't want to delay it. I guess my comment would be, we've had all this time, we've heard concerns about the elevated walkway, and I would agree with Mayor, nobody's entitled to a view. However, the impact, this isn't like buying a house next to an airport. Okay, these people bought units on the bluff for the view of the Intercoastal Waterway. There was a park there was a pavilion. We're encroaching pretty heavily on it. And I don't think had we had this conversation several months ago, because we've known this all along, that a gradual down the hill a little bit still would be ADA compliant, not as impactful to a pretty important group of residents. And it isn't just one resident, one unit. Here's something else. I have been told, I'm fearful there'll be a lawsuit. I'm told that we will win it. But we talk about delays, that could be a big delay. So seeing it at the very top of the hill was kind of a surprise to me, because I maybe didn't ask the right questions. I thought it was going to be a little bit down the hill a little bit. So, and even though it's even only office space there, yes, it will benefit the entire community, the region, the taxpayers. This will be a draw that will spark downtown. But I just think we could have done a little bit better job a long time ago. But I'm not saying start over. I don't want to delay it. But this is I have a much better insight. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not going to. I think I'm in the minority here. So I needed to make those comments.
Mr. Conduct, did you have it?
Yes. I think either it's a bluff walk or it's not a bluff walk. And we have known from its infancy, and everyone in the city knew that there was going to be a bluff walk. And if you don't have a bridge over Cleveland. Then you've separated, bifurcated the north end of the bluff walk with the south. And I think this bluff walk can benefit both the park and the residents who will end up being maybe where the old city hall is and by the library here. It'll benefit everybody. And I don't see any good reasons for shortening the pavilion. What's the logic of it? Who does it benefit? Who doesn't benefit if it's shortened? And the design, to me, looks a lot nicer with a longer pavilion that connects to the bluff walk. My 2 cents worth.
Mr. Albritton?
I just want to clarify myself here. I do not want any more delays in this. We want to move forward on this. But I'm just telling you that I object to that drawing right there because that is wrong. That doesn't show a hill around water's edge. It shows it flat and it shows the bluff walk going over. That's not the way it is. I'm just objecting to giving us the proper things where we can make a decision, not something that's not right. So I think this is something that could be fixed. I'm not saying we need to have a design on this, but I'm saying that when you give us pictures like that are wrong, we can't make the right decisions up here with the wrong information.
Well, I want to go back to the one where you had the waters, yes, yeah, no,
This one here?
the Harbor View Center.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I want us to look at how much we've reduced the mass and yet taken care of our responsibility to the community, not to 1 or 2 people who might have a complaint. Now, I'm hearing what Mr. Albritton is saying, and maybe you can go back and lower. I see a hill there, even, or at least a slope. And I think I'm hearing Mr. Albritton saying, can you bring the walkway down that slope just a little bit without impacting the
I'm just saying, give me a drawing that's correct, that's all. I've spent my entire life looking at drawings, and that is not what we have there. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it can't work. Just give me a proper drawing.
But I don't have your background, Mr. Albritton. So what I'm seeing, I'm interpreting it differently than what you're interpreting. And so I'm not understanding what is wrong with that drawing that you see that I'm not seeing.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask him to show the other design from this angle with the pilings underneath, right there.
That's the way we got it.
Yeah.
Water's edge goes down at an angle. It's not flat straight across like it showed in another design.
Well, no, because the walkway is.
See that white triangle there?
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand what that is. And maybe I don't need to understand it now, but when I look at it, that looks like a built-up, and water's edge isn't flat all the way across. It goes down like that. The units go down. And so that is an obstruction against whatever unit is there, I can tell you.
But isn't the slope on the lowest unit on the left?
Lowest on the left is down in this area, where the white triangle is.
Yeah.
But that white triangle in actuality doesn't exist if you're using pilings to support just open air pilings to support the elevated walkway. You would technically be able to see, you might be looking underneath the walkway and through the pilings.
Don't give us a white triangle that I don't know what it is.
I'm not sure why it doesn't show it, but I understand, and we will get you there. And regardless, this is not necessarily delaying anything. The work order is being constructed, anyway.
Mr. Horn.
Mayor and Council, I think we have some pretty smart engineers that can resolve this issue, and we ought to give them the opportunity to do it so that you all are in debate on just exactly what this is. And we've had somebody walk the ground, and so the assertion is that that slide's not correct. Well, I think we can solve that. I think we can clear that. Number two, I would respectfully ask you all to abandon the conversation around delaying the project. Mayor, your comment was very relevant. The reality is that you all want answers to your questions, and we're going to take the time to answer those questions. When you keep talking about delaying the project, you really undermine your ability to want to have information that can help you make decisions. So I would just not worry about delaying the project. If you've got a question, then we'll take it, figure it out, and come back. If it takes a little while to do that, it takes a little while to do that. From the staff's perspective, we can't win the battle against the constant criticism of delaying this project when you all continue to ask questions because you're trying to be very deliberate in your decision making. Can't have it both ways. So I think, and a classic example was Councilmember Albritton wanting clarification based on him walking the ground. That's fine. We can get it. Don't know how much time it's going to take, but it doesn't matter. He's not going to be satisfied until we give him credible, and you all, credible information about what that presentation actually looks like. So when we hear you ask us questions, we take those as legitimate questions, and we're going to go back and come up with answers.
Okay? Any other questions on this aspect? Are we comfortable with the pavilion as was in the original drawing and not making it any smaller? Okay. So the only thing we have to resolve is what that white triangle is. Whether it's a white triangle or it should have been colored green.
Yeah, and we'll get that information.
Okay.
Absolutely. As it relates to the parking Mr. Horn talked about, so I didn't bring the other slide that, the alternative slide. Well, we do have one, of course, that you saw at the last meeting that sort of rounds out, removes the throughway, Cleveland as a throughway, rounds it out here and moves some of this parking to this area. And I think at the last meeting I mentioned that there were some concerns about the parking and its central nature to the park. The engineers intend to look at it, as will Mr. Delk in his review. And that's something that isn't holding anything up. It's something that we'll look at and design as we move forward into the 30% range and see if there's some different options there. I think some of the parking questions that we've heard in the last couple of weeks relate to the marina specifically, and the access to, I guess, the northern slips by vehicle. In this, I don't have an overlay, but right around in this area here, there are currently parking spaces. The plan calls for parking being pulled off of the water's edge, which we have done. We do have some parking in this area, and there is actually a loading zone that was placed in, and it's not really visible in this diagram, but we can certainly get something that shows it. But there is a loading zone in this area near this dock. So theoretically, individuals could park, unload their stuff at the loading zone, move up, and then actually park in a permanent spot here or in another area of the park. But we do have a loading zone right near this area so that people can get stuff to and from their boat without lugging it across to wherever their parking space is.
Questions regarding that? Council, my question to the city manager when we were talking about this was, Mr. Maxwell, is there some way that maybe we could add 4 or 5 permanent parking spaces in the vicinity of that unloading zone that would be exclusive for the marina people without negatively impacting the overall project?
Not sure.
Okay.
We can certainly look at something
I
like
mean,
that.
is that something that we ought to consider, council, or do y'all?
I would be more inclined, if you're gonna put 3 or 4 spaces, we may be required to put 3 or 4 down there for handicap purposes, but to have, you've got, how many boats are in that marina, and you're only creating 4 or 5 parking spaces?
I think we said what they were, like 25.
It's a conflict.
There were only 25 or 30 in that portion.
Mm-hmm.
There's 20 in this lot here,
Okay.
as far as the old parking spaces.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know what kind of conflict or
Well,
situation we'd be creating by, okay, we're gonna put 4 and it's gonna be a free-for-all, first come, first serve, and everything else. I don't know. But
Mr. Conniff.
What we don't see in there is the gray shading of parking underneath the bridge.
There is parking right in this area.
There's a lot. There is a lot of parking. I don't know how many spots there are, and I know it's a little distance to the.
I believe there's 50 in this lot currently, in this one here.
So do you think, though, that, Ms. Aiken, that we would have to have ADA parking there?
You have to meet the ADA requirements for parking.
Okay. So we may have to have some ADA?
I can't answer
Yeah,
that.
okay.
That's
I
up
think
to
there's a
engineers.
formula.
Yeah.
I think there's a
Okay.
formula that's used.
All right.
There is.
So
Yeah.
just make sure that we're
based on the
compliant.
total number of parking spaces.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So then we're fine with that the way it is?
are you?
Okay, right?
I
Yeah,
have
okay.
one more question.
Yes, sir.
The Harbor Masters building there, is there parking in the plan for that? Because if there is, maybe that's where you could extend.
No, there is no parking, just the loading and unloading zone, which could be used by the harbor master as well. This area here is where I anticipate they would end up parking, somewhere in this lot right there.
And again, if somebody had the question of the harbor master, he would be able to use that unloading zone for a few minutes. Okay. All right. Next. That was
The
it?
final item was
That's
just to,
That's
you know,
it.
just to, mention, obviously, Mr. Delk is going to be taking over the Imagine Clearwater project as the project leader, he's going to be, him and I are going to be working together the next few weeks to get him up to speed on where we are on a number of things. But just wanted to make that comment, and if Michael, if you've got anything you want to, mention.
Not at this point.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Horn? Ms. Aiken?
No, sir.
Council? Mr. Hamilton?
What is the status of the RFP for getting the RFP out to the market as far as the City Hall property, CMA property, and the property that right now is the surface parking between the library and the old Harbor View?
So the redevelopment conversation, the redevelopment strategy conversation, originally planned to have that today.
Okay.
Because of Michael coming over and needing to get him up to speed and making sure that he understands and agrees with what we're talking about, wanted to make sure that he had a chance to dig a little deeper into the project before we come forward with that conversation.
Okay. All right. Because I know and I'm going to go ahead and put this out there publicly from this seat right here. I've spoken with some staff and whatnot and citizens about it, but parking is always going to be an issue for downtown Clearwater and for the park itself. We just tore down the Harbor View Center. There's a hole in the ground. Now, to do what we're looking at doing with that drainage, we're going to have to put some dirt in there to grade it and make it what it needs to be. The surface parking that today exists by to the south side of the library and between the Harbor View, that I would like to see in the RFP, or see if, leave it out there as a suggestion to the development community. If you were to excavate that land back to Osceola, make your hole in the ground there, use that dirt to fill where the Harbor View just came down, you could build with all ingress and egress off of Osceola, all vehicular ingress and egress, you could probably build a 2 to 3 level parking garage on that footprint where the pedestrian exit at ground level is directly into the park, and if you come up to street level, it's parking for downtown. It supplies parking for the park, additional parking for the park. It supplies additional parking and potential parking for downtown. Now, we all know that parking garages and building multi-level parking is not cheap. But if you put it out there to the development community and say, hey, if you're going to get the contract to develop all of this property, we'd like this amenity as part of the project. You know, something for everybody. I'm just putting it out there for everybody, food for thought for people to think about. But, you know, if that's right now, I think it's somewhere around 120 to 150 spaces at ground level right now at street level on Osceola. You do that 3 levels, you've got 300 plus parking spaces for the park and for downtown. When there's an event in the park and things of that nature, it's, you know, it's a prime space, and it's, from a visual standpoint, you're not building above ground, you're building from ground level down, not from elevating from ground level up. So just something to think about.
For some people, that might be a filet, and for somebody else, it may be
hamburger.
Not even. But, okay. Mr. Warren?
Yes, so I want to make sure that I heard what you said. So as Michael moves out on formulating this RFP concept, you want the idea that you just expressed to be considered a part, along with other ideas that he's going to be looking at. And then, of course, he's going to bring the RFP ideas back to you all.
Mm-hmm.
But you specifically want this idea to be considered.
I think it's a viable location for a parking garage without visually inhibiting the development process.
I'm just asking.
That's all I'm saying. And if we get consensus to that, fine. If nobody else agrees with it, I've had other bad ideas too. So
I'm just trying to understand what we're doing. Pam?
Can I suggest you may want to be a little more open-ended in that?
Mm-hmm.
And in that what you're actually looking for is for a developer to consider parking, structured parking possibilities. You're not telling them how to design it.
No.
Or where to put it, right?
No.
You just want that
obviously,
to be
I want
part of a possible consideration.
Exactly. That's a location that I would consider, but the development community might be able to come up with a much better idea than that.
You don't want to restrain.
No, not
what
at
he
all.
does on
Not at all.
Requests for proposals.
Okay.
Mr. Pogler.
Thank you, Mayor. So in addition, Michael and Micah, in addition, I piggyback off what Hoyt said, we have a library reactivation plan that was dated June 2018 that we all had a chance to review this past weekend. From my perspective, I think it's time to include that in the RFP because there is construction, there is costs, and I think the estimate that I saw within that plan a year ago was somewhere around $5 or $6 million. So I'd like to have either that considered to be part of this master RFP, because there's no sense in delaying that. I think that's an opportunity for redevelopment as well. And just to be clear, not to tear it down, but the reactivation was to call for a restaurant, well, what the voters gave us approval to do with the referendum.
Yeah, but those are two different things, weren't they?
I don't necessarily.
I mean,
why
the
would it have to be?
library activation didn't have anything to do with the property that hadn't been developed. There were some things that could be done at the library that didn't need, you know.
But so that would be a separate RFP? Why would it have to be, I guess?
Well, because it dealt just with the library.
Well, I'm not sure that everything in the library activation plan requires an RFP at all.
Right.
A lot of that is just city.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there was one mention of a potential restaurant site that we have not resolved whether or not that can actually be done. We don't know if it's viable or not. So that might be something.
Okay. Well, are we going
But there's some things in the library plan that you know, have been on the,
Okay.
on the back burner and
So
that
then
can go forward.
my question would be, when would we relook at that?
Well, I think there's a number of these things that I've been thinking about over the last several days, as you might imagine. I think there's little danger of us slowing anything down, so just give us a chance to get back up to speed. I've kind of been, not focusing on this for the past couple of years. So I think there's some internal things, some unanimity of both purpose and process internally that we need to work through and bring back to you for that. So I think there'll be a host of things that we'll talk to you about in terms of how to kind of, advance the ball a little bit, if you will. And I think it's not a matter of delay, it's a matter of trying to put our best foot forward and trying to make some headways initially where we can, most effectively. And then, and we're going to look at all these things on the design of the park. This is probably Monday mornings in here is the worst place to design a park. So we're going to take a look at the things that are causing you some consternation right now. And we'll try to bring you back some solutions. I think all your comments were valid. I think I understand them. I get the point of view of the Water's Edge folks. So, this laundry list of things, we're going to take a look at all of it. And so we'll be
Take the time to do it.
We'll be talking about that shortly.
And Mr. Horn and I have had the conversation that we're going to be getting these reports on a much more regular basis, if not every work session, at least every other work session with Mr. Delk, so that we can keep this ball moving, and any questions that might come up, we'll be able to answer, if not during that meeting, surely at the next meeting, so that we don't have these concerns. Okay? With that, our meeting is on Thursday, May the 2nd at 6 p.m. We are adjourned.